It's been over 5 months since Israel launched its offensive on the Gaza Strip, where more than 30,000 Palestinians have been killed. And for those left behind, survival has become almost impossible as Gazans have very limited access to food, clean water and medicine. While delivering aid is becoming harder due to Israeli blockade on the enclave, the EU and other countries hope to partly ease that problem with the recently opened maritime aid corridor. The first ship set sail with 200 tons of food from the Greek Cypriot administration of Cyprus and arrived on the shores of Gaza on March 15. The mission, supported by the EU, UK and US, is a joint initiative by charity organizations, World Central Kitchen and Open Arms. While the US and UK have voiced their concerns over a possible Israeli invasion of Rafah in southern Gaza, the two countries are also Tel Aviv's closest allies. The UN says 85% of the enclave's population are internally displaced and famine is imminent unless steps are taken to cease hostilities. For that, the US Secretary of State Antony Blinken is on a Middle East tour as he held talks with Saudi Arabia and Egypt for a possible ceasefire in Gaza. And now for more on the latest situation in Gaza and aid efforts in the region. Joining me now from Amman is Tess Ingram. She is the UNICEF spokesperson. And from Birmingham in the UK is Kamal Hawash. He is a founding member of British Palestinian Committee. A warm welcome to you both and thanks for joining me on Straight Talk. So Kamal, the first Gaza aid ship departing from southern Cyprus has arrived in Gaza. Is this an efficient step towards providing the Gazans with the most basic needs they have been deprived of so far?
Not at all. The source of the problem is Israel stopping the aid from entering Gaza and reaching every part of Gaza, from the north to the middle to the south. What should have happened is that the international community, and in particular the United States, which has supposedly some leverage, which is supplying Israel with the weapons to kill the Palestinians, to say that what is happening is completely unacceptable. Using starvation as a weapon of war is disgraceful, and everyone should have said all the shipments that are ready to go into Gaza via lots of different points should be allowed in and should reach the people who need it badly. And for that to happen, there should also be an immediate ceasefire.
So, Tess, what do Gazans need the most? And what do you think? Is the international humanitarian aid enough?
Aisha, Kamal is right. They need everything right now. The situation is so desperate that Gazans need food, they need shelter, they need medicines, they need clean and safe water. But above all, they need an end to the fighting. As Kamal said, we need an immediate ceasefire. And I think, it's incumbent on, the parties to the conflict. And UNICEF has been calling as part of the Interagency Standing Committee with other UN agencies for Israel to fulfill its obligations under international humanitarian law to provide that aid. And the international community really does need to step up and echo those calls for an end to the war and for more aid to get in.
So, Kamal, EU's foreign policy chief Joseph Borrell has just recently said Israel is provoking famine in Gaza and using starvation as a weapon of war. What do you make of this statement, and could this somehow lead to the European Union or other Western nations imposing some sanctions on Israel?
Well, he said this, 5 months into this disgraceful attack on the Palestinian people, the civilian. This is not an attack on Hamas. It is an attack on the Palestinian people, not only in terms of cutting electricity very early on and water and reducing aid, but also destroying 80% or 70% of their homes. People will have nowhere to get back to, and they're cramped into an area where Israel is still carrying out attacks on specific homes, which it knows are full of civilians. They're not full of fighters of any sort. And therefore, it is all very well for Borrell to say this, but what actions has the EU taken? Has it stopped the supply of weapons to Israel? Has it said that it will demand an immediate ceasefire? No conditions, just a ceasefire to stop people being killed. And if he does that, by the way, it isn't just Palestinians who aren't killed. Israelis will not be killed either. Yes. So it's in everyone's interest to have this ceasefire now, but Israel should be sanctioned for what it's doing, and its leaders should be held accountable.
So, Tess, the United Nations says 85% of enclave's population are now internally displaced, and that the famine is imminent unless necessary steps are taken. Could you talk to us especially about the plight of the children? I mean, what's the situation on the ground?
It's beyond breaking point, Aisha. We did some screenings in the north of the Gaza Strip where the situation is the most severe, and we found that acute malnutrition in babies, children under 2, doubled in the space of a month, and now 1 in 3 children there are acutely malnourished. Now, that has to be unacceptable to people everywhere in the world, particularly when there's food and aid just a few kilometres away with willing humanitarian aid workers to bring it to these children. There really is no excuse, and what we need is for more aid to get in, for the safety assurances that we require to bring that aid to the kids, and for more crossing points to be open. So as Kamal said, that we can get more aid in quickly and just flood the Gaza Strip with food to try and prevent this famine. It's still not too late, but it is looming around every corner.
But how is that going to happen as long as Israel blocks humanitarian aid to Gaza? I mean, do you have any suggestions?
Well, look, I think the other aid delivery methods that member states have been trying, such as airdrops and bringing food in by ships, are welcome, but they are nowhere near enough to meet the need. They're just a drop in the ocean. And so what we do need is the facilitation of aid through all of the available border crossings. If we can just get more aid in on trucks, then that's the way to go. And we're calling on the international community to really help push that at the moment to try and prevent this famine.
Yeah. We also know that those airdrops also killed several Palestinians. So, Kamal, the U.S. has recently stepped up its efforts to reach a ceasefire as U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken holds talks in Saudi Arabia and Egypt. What should be expected of those contacts? Are you hopeful?
I'm not really that hopeful because when you listen to the messages coming out from Israel, from Netanyahu and his ministers, it is all about continuing the attack on the Palestinians, particularly in Rafah. You just showed images, and because that is important. It isn't just the government that is subjecting the Palestinians to hunger. You've got Israeli citizens standing there at these entry points, stopping aid from going into the Palestinians. So this is not just an Israeli government issue. It's an Israeli societal issue, which is horrendous, that they do not see the Palestinians as human beings. And they are human beings, and they should be allowed to have everything come in. I saw 2 children who were telling that were reported on. One had lost her legs amputated, and she was saying, "Please, can I have my legs back?" But there was another one of a boy who'd lost his hands, who was saying to his father, "Will they grow again?" I mean, this is the level of depravity of this Israeli attack on the Palestinians, that these kids will forever be without their limbs. And if Israel thinks these 2 will grow up to love it, then it doesn't understand what it has caused. The hatred that it has generated against it is really at a very high level, and that will not dissipate, even if they try to change the curriculum. This is what people have lived and experienced, and their hate will be directed at Israel, undoubtedly.
So, Tess, as a spokeswoman of UNICEF, I mean, do you believe that the regional countries have taken enough responsibility to stop this inhumane situation in Gaza? And as Kamal mentioned, who'll be treating those children who were traumatized and injured by the Israeli attacks?
Look, I think the international community, including countries in the region, can do so much more. We're in the 6th month of this war, and yet it continues, and it continues to get worse every day. So it's very clear that more can be done. In terms of how these children are being treated, UNICEF is on the ground along with other UN agencies like WHO trying to do our best. But the access that we have is far too limited, and the needs are enormous. I was in Gaza in January, and I heard stories like the ones that Kamal just told. I met a boy called Ibrahim who's 13, and he was hit by shrapnel in a safe place that was meant to be safe, in a shelter. It damaged his hand, it then got infected, and he had to have an amputation just below his shoulder, and that amputation was done without any anesthetic. So this is what children are suffering through every single day.
Unfortunately. So, Kamal, just one last question. We've talked about Antony Blinken's contacts. He's touring Saudi Arabia and Egypt. But what do you make of the Egyptian position? My question is, could its opposition to taking Gazan refugees change after a 7.4 billion euro economic aid and migration deal with the European Union?
To be fair to Egypt, the president has said that there's no way that they will allow this to happen. Of course, Israel can do something that will make it happen by actually bombing the people in Rafah, but also bombing gaps, if you like, in the border to make it possible for them to go. And let's be practical and sane. If you are in danger of being killed and your children are in danger of being killed, and there is a way to escape this, people will understand if Palestinians thought about it. They're very resilient. They want to stay on their land, and they should stay on their land. Israel should be told that it must leave Gaza alone and let people recover from what is the most traumatic set of conditions they've endured since the Nakba, and in Gaza's case since 1967. What Israel is doing is absolutely criminal, and it should be held accountable for what it's doing.
We'll see how it's going to play out as Israel now plans to invade Rafah. Kamal and Tess, unfortunately, we'll have to leave it here. Thank you very much for joining me on Straight Talk.